Welcome to Gone to Texas, a podcast about AMC's Preacher. My name is Alex, and I have not read any of Garth Ennis's Preacher.
And I am Nick, and I have read all of Garth Ennis's Preacher.
Today, we'll be discussing episode 3 of the show, titled The Possibilities. And while we will not be spoiling any of the comic and, by extension, any future plot lines of the show, we will be discussing the details of the series through episode 3, so pause this and go watch the show before you listen to the rest of our episode. You can find more of our episodes at g2tpodcast.com. That's the letter G, number 2, letter T, podcast.com. We're also G2T Podcast on Twitter, and you can send feedback to g2tpodcast@gmail.com to tell us what you think of our show and share your thoughts about AMC's Preacher so we can read them on air. Send us corrections, observations, or anything regarding Preacher or our podcast. This past week, we were contacted by the folks at AMC who wanted to do some cross-promotion for the Preacher Insider podcast, which is AMC's official Preacher podcast. Assistant editors Will Blank, Matt Smith, and Monica Daniel host a weekly conversation with cast and crew of AMC's original series Preacher. They sent a clip of the show to play where showrunner Sam Catlin and executive producer Evan Goldberg discussed the mysterious cowboy at the beginning of the previous episode. So we're going to cut to that right here so you can check out a little bit of their podcast.
The cowboy is a fan favorite, and anyone who's read the comic should know who he is pretty quick. And if they don't,
you're not a fan of the
themselves in disgrace because you're not a real fan.
So you can neither confirm nor deny anything.
I can't say anything except it's exactly what you think it is, if you know what it is. But if you don't know what it is...
You don't need to know. If you don't know, you'll find out. You'll figure it out.
But it's the part that I'm the most excited about. Every time I get to see anything based on the cowboy, I get giddy.
And is it a one-to-one with the comic, or are we going new directions with it, or...?
It's
in some ways, that story is... in many ways, the most similar from Garth's comic. It's sort of, how do I say it? It's sort of, the context of the story is different. It actually sort of will resonate in a different way by the time it's over. And we'll see. It'll have everything to do, even though it takes place in 1881, you'll see by the end of the season that it has everything to do with Jesse.
Pretty good discussion of the cowboy. I think Nick got a little more excited about it.
Yeah, I can't wait to see. Well, maybe I do know where it goes, but maybe I don't. It sounds like
you're excited to see it depicted.
Absolutely.
So we decided to do this cross-promotion because the Insider podcast offers things that we can't, like getting inside of the production and picking the brains of those that are actually working on the show. But at the same time, they kind of need to pull their punches a little bit because they're going to spoil. They don't want to spoil anything in the future. And Nick and I can speculate a little bit more, and Nick can kind of do some non-denial denials and things like that, and so we still have some punches to pull, but we're a little bit more open to discussion than they are. So check out the Preacher Insider podcast, available on iTunes and where podcasts can be found. And thank you guys very much for giving us the opportunity to do a little cross-promotion. So this week we got some feedback. This is from Bruce K. He said, "Dear G2T Podcast, I'm a big fan of the comics and I'm enjoying the show so far. About Tulip, they mentioned on Talking Dead, or Talking Preacher, I think he meant, that she has a very good reason for wanting Jesse to go along in this job. It just hasn't been specified yet." I think this is me talking now. I think we learned a little bit more about that in this episode, so we'll get to that shortly. Also, one observation that I have is that I feel there will be some sort of consequence for the bus driver forgetting about the little girl, and we'll see that soon. Also true. A little bit more of that in this episode, although it may not have come to full fruition as of yet.
Right.
And then he said, "Finally, why do you guys think that Cassidy hates The Big Lebowski?" That's from Bruce. Bruce from the Screenplay Archaeology podcast, where he and rotating co-hosts discuss unproduced screenplays on a monthly-ish basis. So check that out.
That is cool.
Yeah, so Bruce, thank you for writing in. Why do we think Cassidy hates The Big Lebowski? Nick?
It's funny because as that moment aired last week, and I completely forgot to talk about it on last week's episode,
Yeah.
but as that moment aired and that joke happened, I started laughing so hard, and I said to Alex, I was just having this conversation the day before
Yep.
with somebody else, except I don't hate The Big Lebowski, but I don't enjoy it to the
You think
extent
it's overrated?
I think it's either, I don't even know if it's overrated necessarily, but maybe it's just not my cup of tea.
Okay.
Which is weird because I really enjoy the Coens, but something about that movie I laugh at, and I'm like, yeah, it's good, it's funny, but yeah, I guess maybe I do think it's a little overrated. I guess, but it was just funny because the words came out of his mouth, and I just started cracking up because it was just one of those things. The day before, I'd been talking to somebody, and I was like, yeah, The Big Lebowski. I don't know, it's good, but I guess it's important. It definitely is unique and original enough to kind of put their name a little bit more out there.
We like the Coen brothers, as you can hear on the Midwest Film Nerds podcast if you go back to any of our episodes where we talk about their movies. But I don't know. I've really only seen The Big Lebowski in bits and pieces. I've seen the whole movie probably 4 times over, but it's always been in bits and pieces. And there's never been a part of me that wants to sit down and watch the whole thing straight through. I would like to at some point, but I've never felt the drive to do that. So
it's almost original to a fault, to the point where I have a hard time getting invested in it because it's just so different than anything else.
yeah.
The one thing I absolutely unabashedly, completely and totally love about it is Philip Seymour Hoffman. He's so good at it. I mean, everybody in it's good. That's the weird thing.
Yeah,
Is like
no, Jeff
there's,
Bridges.
There's nothing I can say like that's bad. That part of The Big Lebowski is like Buscemi in it is just really awesome.
Yeah.
And John Turturro. I mean, there's so many memorable things about it, but for some reason,
Here's something I'll say. I don't think I could fault anybody who walks up and says this Coen Brothers movie is terrible. Because I think it's a very particular flavor.
it's true.
And something tells me that Cassidy is not the kind of guy that likes a Coen Brothers movie.
That is very valid. So I guess you're the one actually answering Bruce's question.
Well, I just wanted to kind of bring it back around. I think that might be...
Yeah, it's
case.
Cassidy's really interesting. I would love to, like, from the comics, I kind of have a bead on what sort of culture he likes.
Yeah.
But what sort of culture he's kind of embraced and made his own, despite his unique standing as an individual.
117-year-old
Yes,
vampire.
and 119, I believe.
119,
Before anybody
excuse me.
writes a no. Watch, we're both wrong.
Probably.
Anyway.
But yeah.
Yeah, I agree. I would be. We do learn a little bit more about what Cassidy likes in this episode.
Yeah.
So
Yep. So thank you, Bruce, for writing in.
yes, thank you very much. Please
feel
keep
free.
going.
Yeah, write in some more. Everybody else out there, we are g2tpodcast@gmail.com.
And we always answer
Yes, we
all,
do.
any and all criticisms or compliments.
There are no stupid questions. Maybe. We'll find out.
Those are the ones we don't answer.
All right. So let's break into episode 103. Well, we're calling it 103. AMC's doing this weird thing where the pilot has become episode 0. So I don't know if that means we are getting 10 additional episodes after that,
Oh,
or if we're only getting up to 109. But anyway, we're calling it 103. And we open on a teaser where Tulip is in Houston talking with the aforementioned Danny in episode 2 about Danny's abusive husband and relationship. And they're basically there to exchange the map that that Tulip fought to get. And in exchange, Danny gives Tulip the last known address of somebody that she wants to track down.
mm-hmm.
We see that map go to a man in a white suit and hat. I think I remember you saying this is somebody that you know, Nick?
Yes, this is somebody of great significance.
Somebody who you've been waiting to be introduced.
Yeah, definitely.
Was the introduction good, or does it leave you wanting more?
No, well, yes, to both.
Yeah.
It is a really good introduction. It's pretty perfect for the character, I think, and it absolutely leaves me wanting more. I'm beginning to understand the rhythm of this show now.
Okay.
So as frustrating as it is, I get it now that, like, as soon as that scene closed, I was like, I'm not going to see him for at least another week,
Yeah.
if not 2.
Yeah.
But
Basically,
that's okay because it's a good introduction.
Seems like he's in some kind of makeshift movie theater or something.
There was a poster on the wall that said Houston 4th Annual Snuff Film Festival or something like
That's
that.
what I thought.
Something
It
really
sounded like
gross.
snuff films were going on,
Totally.
basically. And then basically he stands up, or at some point he gets up and walks out to go deal with something or do something with this map, I guess.
Mm-hmm.
So Tulip also has a question. What is Grail Industries? Apparently the map is the property of Grail Industries, so I think that's a question that we'll want answered later on. But so that's all for the teaser of this episode, I think. Act 1, we had quite a bit going on. We've got the strange men continuing their conversation with the sheriff, letting him know that they are tracking down something that got loose and people are in danger. They're undercover. They seem to be of European origin, somewhere in the UK.
Mm-hmm.
So the sheriff tells the story basically about kids at an amusement park getting lost, I believe.
I think just a park.
Or just
Playground.
Yeah, playing at a park, and there's, I think, an old man that used to work there that snapped or something like that. It seemed like a non sequitur story, but maybe he's just kind of relating it to maybe there's stuff going on in this town that I don't know about.
I think yeah, exactly. And for the fact that things can happen kind of under your nose or in the background without you even knowing. And it was almost kind of a No Country for Old Men moment. There's that really awesome monologue that Tommy Lee Jones has at the end of No Country for Old Men that pretty much explains the title of the movie and like the kind of core theme.
Mm-hmm.
And I kind of it reminded me a lot of that. And I really liked it though.
Yeah.
It's pretty, even for this show, it is pretty non sequitur. It wasn't necessarily eased into with the it definitely felt like here's the part in the script we're excited to get to.
Yeah.
But that's okay. I think that there's two things I'm really beginning to just love about this show, and it's these semi-extended monologues that people have or conversations that are frequently they seem like they're about something else, but they're kind of tying into what's going on. And then I'm really loving the direction of a lot of these actors, these little subtleties that they have, whether it be like how they pronounce something or these little tiny facial expressions. Like the best part of this episode is one that we'll talk about for sure.
Absolutely.
But even the opening scene with Danny, she had this when she's telling her whole long scenario. It was man, this is such camera porn. This show, it has so many just fantastic shots throughout it, and this opening shot on Danny is really, 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 really cool. And her whole dialogue is really interesting, and it's delivered so well. And the way that Tulip says, "I'm not going to kill your husband."
Yeah.
And then Danny just kind of has this moment of like, "Huh, that's too bad." And
Yeah.
it's this real like it's almost as meditative as McConaughey in Tropic Thunder when he does that little and talking about his son, which I still think that little noise that he makes is some of the best acting of that year because it's no one else could do it and it's perfect. But with this show, the devil is really in the details with a lot of these performances, and it's just fascinating. I really, really am enjoying it so far.
Yeah, I should note this is the first time that Seth Rogen and Evan Goldberg are not directors.
Yeah, I was just trying to look up who the director was. I couldn't find it.
I can't remember exactly. I can't remember who it is. I think he's worked on a lot of other AMC stuff. He worked on Breaking Bad and a few other things. I'll try to look him up in a minute. But I think it's... I was curious when I saw that. I was like, is he going to continue the language of the show? Is it still going to... Are we going to feel it get away from them, or is it going to did they set it up really well? And I think so far it seems like it fits in the same.
Yeah, I think in ways it's actually almost a little better. It's almost becoming a little bit more refined.
Yep.
And there's a lack of action in this one, so it's a bit of a contrast to the first two. But some of these little moments are getting really polished really well, and they're finding this. Everyone's getting more into their characters now, and it's just very, very good.
Totally. So the strange men resolve to try again to capture the thing that they're going after, and we see them reveal lots of guns and ammunition. So more on that later. We cut to a shot of the girl in the Loach family with her eyes open now, still catatonic at the very least. But basically the mother is explaining to the organist at the church, I forgot her, Emily, I think is her name.
Yep.
Explaining to Emily that basically Jesse ran away after her eyes opened up, and but the woman seems she really downplayed Jesse's words that he shared last week in terms of like, well, yeah, that's meaningless to me because I still have to deal with this. But now she seems kind of repentant about that now that there's been some development in her daughter's status. So I thought that was kind of interesting. We see the Quincannon boy from the pilot, who the annoying kid from
Wet Hot
American Summer, First Day of Camp on Netflix.
Is he actually a Quincannon?
I think he's a Quincannon because I think he's Donnie Quincannon's son.
Oh, okay. Oh, Donnie is a Quincannon. That's right. Okay. Yeah. Sure.
Yeah. So basically, the kid is apologizing to Donnie about the broken arm and the whole situation, but then Donnie tries to kind of explain what the situation is with his mother and how she likes the pain, but he doesn't quite do a good job of it because there's no good way to explain that to a kid. I thought that was a fun little conversation.
Yeah.
But then we pull up to the bus pulls up and Donnie's letting his son get on the bus. But then we see the bus driver from last week not remembering Janie, the young girl that he was weirdly lusting after.
Mm-hmm.
The kids call him Mr. Creepy Weirdo and remark about the fact that he kind of forgot her. So as Bruce said, we're starting to see some... It seems like he forgot Janie, but he seems also still weirdly interested in her. So it didn't solve the issue. The Jesse's actions didn't really fix anything.
Correct. Yep.
As of yet. So interesting to note. Maybe more on that in a later episode. And then finally, Emily's at the church and she knocks on the door to try and get in. Cassidy's there. And he opens up the door to find that there's a coffin to take care of on the front lawn, basically. And he gets ready to go and do that, but then he finds Jesse in a kind of curious, pensive state. And he says, I want to show you something. So that's Act 1. All that happened in Act 1 of the show.
Whew.
Pretty heavy. But
I really liked the brief kind of moment of something's up that Donnie has after the bus driver. He says, like, what happened to you? And then he doesn't get a chance to talk about it. And there's kind of this moment of like, huh, that's weird. And the combination of that exchange and then Emily talking to the Mrs. Loach.
Yeah.
I really feel the series building towards this eventual, like, townsfolk with pitchforks kind of thing, just bearing down on Jesse. I think that the people, some dots are going to start to get connected, and eventually someone's going to say, like, the preacher broke my arm, and he went and visited your daughter, and he burned your face with, like, and pretty soon all these little moments that he's having that he's not paying attention to, I think are going to start to really accumulate and snowball into some big, like, conflict of Anvil versus Jesse Custer.
Interesting.
And I'm really excited if that's true, because that's and this is pure speculation. This isn't informed at all by anything that happens in the comics. So I think that I see there was a little moment in Donnie's face where he's kind of like, man, that's weird. Why does that guy got that big ass bandage on his face? And he kind of just had this look in his face, like, huh.
All kinds of weird happenings going on.
How many more people are going to be walking around sporting, like, sutures and stuff before someone goes, hey man, who whooped your ass? Oh, it was that preacher, huh?
Yeah. Interesting. Even with what happens with Donnie later on in the episode, you can see that he's clearly more than tipped off that Jesse's got more going on. But all right, we'll get back to that. Act 2 opens up. Tulip's pulled over on the freeway. She basically gives kind of it's not really a sob story, but she hands over like a fake license to the cop and kind of tips off that she was maybe in the military, but maybe not. Mm-hmm. I think she could easily be in the military, but she could also easily just have that ring to kind of get out of this kind of thing.
Yeah, it's great.
That's good.
It's so playful and just, she's still crushing it. Yep. And this feels like the first episode where we've really had some good utilization of Tulip.
Yeah.
And it's really exciting.
Yeah, even like the arrested development of the Tulip storyline didn't bother me this much this episode, because I feel like
we finally got some answers.
Yeah, we get some answers, and she gets enough to do otherwise that's still kind of like, okay, it's not grating on me anymore.
Yep.
And I think Jesse's, we'll get to this later, but Jesse's feelings on the matter kind of actively, it makes sense of why she's trying hard and why he's resisting.
Mm-hmm.
So basically Tulip gets out of a 65 over ticket, which is pretty good. Kind of shows her prowess of charisma, at the very least.
That was a great scene.
And she explained that she'd break 100 laws just to get Jesse back on track. I presume is who she was talking about. So we cut to Jesse using his powers on Cassidy, pretty much having a lot of fun with it. It almost seems like he gets kind of carried away until he almost knocks Cassidy out. That was fun to watch. Cassidy's acting ridiculous worked well. I could see that being the scene that they read to figure out how their chemistry works.
Yeah, that's what they read in
the screen test or whatever for them. Yeah, totally. The audition, audition piece.
That's always a process that I'd love to hear more about. Like, which parts of the script did you read? Or there's a lot of great stories from both films and TV shows stemming out of like what happened during a casting session, or you know how one actor would go in to read for one part, but instead they'd read for another part, and they'd be like, "Oh, you know, you were actually really good for that." I mean, there's oodles of those.
That's a reason to listen to the Preacher Insider podcast, because I know that on the Better Call Saul and Breaking Bad Insider podcasts, they very often have the actors on to talk about that kind of thing. And one of the beautiful things about Breaking Bad, you kind of learn that they would write fake scenes that are very much in the same tone of what they want to grab the actors for. This is in like the later seasons for smaller parts, maybe. Gotcha. But they would match tone and kind of emotion and where they wanted things to go, but they would make it completely removed from the show so that they didn't give away any plot details.
That's clever.
So
that must be nice if you have just writing to spare.
Yeah, exactly.
We've got this great dialogue that we're not going to use.
So check out the Preacher Insider podcast. I don't know how much they'll get into that, but they have the access to the people to do that.
Yeah, no, I love hearing about that kind of stuff. So that would be really interesting to know.
Yeah. Then we cut to Quincannon meeting Power. We see a woman deliver some papers to Odin, who's sitting in the dark listening to the slaughterhouse via intercom.
Yes.
Kind of tells you a lot about Odin. with
no
dialogue.
We're right on track so far. We're full speed ahead with Odin Quincannon.
Yeah,
it's great.
I as soon as that shot pulls up of his office, I'm like, man, what a room to put Jackie Earle Haley in.
It's giant, crusty, old, minimalist, scary, dark, long,
and like very violently lit.
Yes,
awesome, so good. And then,
and I said while we were watching it, the casting on this show is so great from top to bottom, because that woman is walking down the hallway and you just have this profile of her, and she has just got this beak of a nose, and it is just spectacular. Like I'm just watching this secretary walk, and I'm immediately like, man, do these people all feel like the realest people? Even though this show is so heightened reality, it's excellent. I love that they're picking these little oddballs for all these parts. It's really, that woman in the hallway, she literally has no dialogue.
Yeah.
And
she left a mark on you.
She's so memorable. Yeah. It's great.
Yeah, absolutely. All right, and then we close out Act 2 with Cassidy kind of consoling Jesse on his powers. Jesse's got a little monologue saying, "It feels like there's a big blender in my gut, and inside that blender there's everything. Love, hate, fire, ice, polonium, ice cream, tarantulas, everything. All of God's creation inside of me." And then Cassidy kind of comes back at him, eventually saying, "Come on, Padre, you just imagine the possibilities here." We get the title of the episode in Cassidy's words, just to kind of be like, you could do something with this. Like, there might be a reason you have this power. So
interesting.
Yeah.
I think it's interesting you took it that way.
Why? Did you take it in a more sinister
Oh, absolutely.
manner?
Yeah.
Yeah, I think that's what's on Cassidy's mind, but I think he's appealing to what he thinks Jesse would want to hear.
That's interesting.
Because I think while he and Jesse kind of know each other, and he knows that there's more to Jesse than what he's seeing, he also I think he sees the front-facing priest or preacher part of Jesse, and knows that he can kind of be like, you could do some good with this power, while simultaneously being like, and you could also help me with this power.
That's good. Yeah, totally.
So I think that was a fun little thing. I'm interested on why they picked polonium as the element to throw into that little speech there, but I'll have to read up on that. As a chemical engineer myself, I thought it was kind of curious. Polonium, I think, is radioactive and kind of later on down the table, but more on that later maybe. All right, Act 3. we open up on the strange men. One of them sitting on the bed watching the Tom Cruise funeral procession on the news. And it's kind of fun listening to the background dialogue there about he was in countless movies, Top Gun and Mission Impossible.
Yeah. It's funny that joke is just still kind of carrying over. Yeah.
It's funny because I feel like that was probably all Seth Rogen, but I really love it, even though I don't typically love Seth Rogen.
Yeah, same here.
I think that it's really funny. It's a funny little thing that they throw in. But basically, we see the strange men suiting up in their military garb and getting ready to go and take another go at Jesse, I suppose. And then here I didn't know his name, so I had him down as Broken Arm Quincannon. But Donnie meets with Odin to discuss about some non-responsive customers or prospective customers of Quincannon Meat and Power.
Or more people they just want to bulldoze, buy out, and...
Yeah, and he's just kind of like, do you want me to talk to him? And then Odin's like, you could clean this plate off for me. And he can't do that because he's got one arm. So
It was awesome.
Odin remarks, right-hand man with no right hand. That's like his third line in the episode, and that's it for Jackie Earle Haley.
Yeah.
Pretty good.
No, I thought that was a pretty brilliant way of displaying that he's kind of useless right now.
Yeah.
I thought it was really funny.
It's kind of showing the dynamic in the family. I think last episode we watched Donnie break that guy's nose, potentially being another Quincannon brother or just somebody else working at the family. So maybe you're seeing kind of like a trail of not negligence, but like the kind of, maybe Donnie's got abandonment issues or something, and he's feeding it down into the people that work below him or something like that, or his little brother,
or just frustrations
of
not being able to please his old man.
Yep. So, but also he couldn't. He does that because I think at one point he drops a pen, and Donnie can't pick it up because of his arm or something like that. I think that's what. So it's a little bit more about his ineffectualness as well. So we're getting a lot of.
Oh yeah, I just took it as like the meanest thing because he asked him, "Do you want me to go kick his ass?" He's like, "You want me to go down there and kick his ass and show him what's up?" And even in the moment, I was kind of thinking like, "Well, you really only got the one arm, so
what are you gonna do?
Maybe you could. I don't know." But then I just like that Odin, instead of just telling him, "Hey man, you're a dumbass," he just goes like, "Just pick up that tray instead." And then he can't even do it. He goes, "Never mind." I was like, "Oh man, that's great."
Yep. We cut to Tulip catching up, or no, excuse me. We've got so we see Cassidy at the crematorium, the Ernesto crematorium. Is that familiar? No?
No.
Nothing in the comic? All right. And Cassidy spots the strange men driving by, probably heading over to the church. But then Tulip catches up with Jesse on the road, and they kind of stop to smoke, and she mentions Houston says hello, and Jesse doesn't really care and asks her if he seems different. And she's kind of like, you seem tired and worn out. You don't look good, but it seems more common nowadays. So Tulip's kind of like, I don't care about any of that. Let's talk about my job. I got this piece of paper from Danny, and it causes Jesse to say the name Carlos. So now we have a name, but who's Carlos? That's another question we got here. They flash back to a similar flashback that Tulip had earlier in the episode, showing that Jesse shoots a cop. I think we're good. Showing Jesse shoots a cop, and then I think Danny drives away. Doesn't she shout Danny?
No, she says, she just says, like, stop. I think she says, wait.
Okay.
Because I think that they show it early in the episode, and it implies that Jesse left her. Because she says to Danny, that's where Jesse left. Or
that's where everything...
That was the end, or that was the day, and that was the end for me and Jesse, or something like that. And then they show it, and so I instantly took it as like, oh, wow, Jesse totally left her high and dry. And you hear, like, a bank siren in the background.
Yep.
So, but then they show that Jesse was right there, and so it's implied now anyway to me that it's Carlos who left them
over. Yeah.
She also does say, she spouts off a whole string of remarks about Carlos. She says like he's a kid killing, life ruining, 2 timing, 4 flushing kind of thing. But she lists off this string of like credentials, basically that he's a bad dude.
Yeah.
and that he definitely screwed them out of something serious or killed somebody that was, really important to them.
Yeah, so she says, "Come on, Jesse, come on, let's go kill Carlos," and then they drive off in Tulip's
They
car.
peel out, and it's
Yeah.
awesome.
Yeah, and it's she's kind of rattling off his resume to kind of be like, you want to be a good man, let's go stop this bad man.
Mm-hmm.
So, Act 4, strange men are packing up their arsenal, head over to the church at night. So I guess maybe they weren't heading over there yet, but Cassidy ends up running them over in his van. And then he kind of quickly realizes that he's already killed them once. He's going to go get the stuff to clean them up, and they come in the church. And
I love he just says clones, and he's totally fine with that answer. He just walks away. He's like, all right,
yeah.
it's going to take a little longer to bury him. And he's like, yeah, clones must be. Duh.
Yeah.
It's funny, the perspective that he must have being a vampire. He's just kind of like, well, whatever. What do I
Yeah,
know?
he is ready to believe and discount basically anything
And
that's
just
going on.
get ready for the next set of clones whenever they show up. Yeah,
Yeah.
it's pretty good.
So they kind of have this discussion, and the strange men reveal that the preacher has something of theirs, and they want it back. So then we cut away. Jesse and Tulip are gassing up at a gas station, and Jesse's trying to tell Tulip something, but this dude is honking at her from behind to get out of the way, and she just won't have it at all. And then we get this micro expression from Jesse that you enjoyed very much.
It's so funny.
It's beautiful. He gives just a little head shake to how
There's his whole face does like the wave. It's really funny. He's sitting there, and it's one of those things that's so perfect and practiced and then learned over time. Like in that expression, he very clearly told us that he has spent so much time with Tulip and he knows her so well, and that this is just another ridiculous thing that she does all the time. It gets almost no actual reaction out of him.
Yeah.
When what she's doing is clearly just ridiculous. It's so stupid. And he just and as he starts to look back, he is one of his eyebrows comes up and you see his jaw move. He's just kind of like he's trying to think of how to react to it. And instead of just the little tiniest of head shakes.
He's not going to say anything.
Very, very funny.
It's very similar. It's reminiscent to me of Iron Man 2 with Justin Hammer at the bar and Robert Downey Jr. there. And Justin Hammer says something about how Christine Everhart or whatever her name is
right.
Is doing a spread on him or something like that, and you just see Robert Downey Jr. kind of give this quick little no, I'm not gonna comment on that.
Right.
It's a very similar expression and just as well thought out and decidedly placed there that kind of really lets you appreciate these people playing these characters.
Absolutely. Yeah,
So-
it's great.
But then we have Jesse head in to go to the bathroom, and Donnie's in there with a gun. And he basically wants to humiliate Jesse or kill him or something like that for the reputation that Donnie's kind of gained. But then Jesse says, "I'll make you one promise. If the cops find your body, I'll make it look like a suicide." And then he uses his power to set up that suicide tableau. But then kind of as he realizes what he's doing, he's enjoying it a little bit up until he gets to the point of where he's about to essentially kill this man against his will. Well, obviously, you kill somebody, it's against their will. But he tells Donnie to drop the gun. And then he says, "I get it." Do you know what he meant by that? What did you get off of that kind of reaction?
That was a little weird. I think that was not so much about the power, but I think he thinks that he was given that power.
Is it maybe Cassidy's words clicking with him?
Well, I think it is that, and the whole season so far, and obviously we're still barely into it. It feels like we're on episode 7, even though we're totally not.
Yeah.
And I've been wondering why he hasn't talked about or thought about the heavenly body that visited him, and I was wondering if he forgot, if the moment was quote unquote traumatic enough where his brain blocked it out.
Yeah.
But I'm thinking that he probably chalked it up to just being drunk, maybe.
Yeah.
But I think in this moment, he's kind of understood that he has this power now in order to maybe fulfill his mission and help the people of Anvil, become a better preacher and show them the light of the Lord, etc. And I would love to go back and watch the pilot again to see if I'm pretty sure he has a moment where he's praying or he starts to pray, and he's like, he has some kind of mission statement of what he wants to do,
Yeah.
and I think that's when it shows up. And I'd love to watch it again to hear exactly what he was saying. But anyway, I think what he's saying is it's not him understanding how the power works, because I think he gets it. But I think he says I get it. So I think he's basically understanding now. He thinks it's part of his mission. And so I think it's going to reignite that, like, the preacher in him that wants to, like, actively help people.
Interesting.
But I think he still hasn't quite learned firsthand how destructive it can be accidentally.
He doesn't. I don't think he understands the literal, how literal it is.
Yeah, he hasn't told anybody anything that's too, like, up to interpretation, except for Annoying Man in the first episode, and even then, I'm not sure if he's really understood.
Good old
exactly.
Ted Ryerson.
Yes. So yeah, that's right.
He still hasn't made that connection.
I was waiting for them to cut back to the girl who was catatonic, and then being like, her eyes are like crusty and like getting infected and shit because they won't close, or they can't close them, which is the way it works in the books. Basically, there is no reversing it unless he does it.
But I wonder if like in that case, he says open your eyes, not keep your eyes open.
True, but he doesn't say open them and then close them.
Yeah.
So I mean that's how it works though. Like
okay.
it's just open your eyes. Okay, what do I do next? So I think that there may be some sort of incubation period or some sort of half-life on his powers, like for it to eventually fall off. But there's some pretty specific ones that happen later in the books that are pretty interesting, where he begins to learn how to calibrate it in a way so that he knows to say, like, sit here for 1 hour and then get up and leave kind of thing. So he starts to know how to, like,
he's
how to
really
time it.
Learned his ways around it.
So he could have, like, I almost expected him when he got it with Donnie, I almost expected him to say, wait 10 minutes and then go home or something like that.
Yeah.
And he can get very specific with it. It's really cool. I'm really excited that now he's starting to kind of tap into it and
play around a bit.
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah, it's really neat.
Awesome. So Jesse kind of walks out, and having had that epiphany, he decides not to go to Carlos, and Tulip gets pretty angry with him. And,
it's pretty funny.
Yeah. So still waiting for that to break off more, but I think getting the backstory and understanding more about why they are the way they are, it bothered me less this episode. That
for sure.
That Tulip is still these two the unstoppable force is meeting the immovable object. Like, that's what that is, literally.
I feel like the three lead characters are all kind of in a place now where they've all caught up to me. So I feel like with the pilot, you really got a sense of who Jesse was, what he wanted to do, where he was going. And with Cassidy, you don't really get that, but you don't need it. And I think the show kind of builds in the idea that Cassidy doesn't really need a clean-cut objective. He's kind of there as almost a foil. But I think that there's some big stuff coming around the corner for him.
He's got a little bit of that chaotic thing going on.
Right. When we did learn kind of what his chief force of antagonism is in these vampire hunters that are always trying to find him.
Yep.
And now I feel like Tulip is finally in a place where we understand her motivations. We understand why she wants Jesse involved so bad, and just kind of what she's about. We've had a lot of examples of her ability to talk her way in and out of situations. And so I feel like those three are all kind of on a level playing field now as far as character development.
So you thought Jesse left her high and dry in the flashback?
The very first time they showed it, I assumed it was Jesse driving away and her saying, "No way."
So when you learned more, is this hearkening back to something in the books? I don't want you to speak too much to it, but is it there? Okay.
Yeah, in a way. Yeah,
okay.
Pretty much.
Okay.
It's just yes, but Tulip is super different in the show. So it is kind of the same, but kind of not.
Okay. That's all right.
Well, we'll see what the next episode has in store.
Yep.
That's funny. I think the Tulip situation is going to be like the number one talking point of the whole season. We're just gonna keep going. Like, so what's up with Tulip?
Yeah. Hey, all right, and then we've got starting up with Act 5. The strange men are still talking with Cassidy, wondering what they're kind of from, what they want to do with Jesse's power. They tell him they're from the government, and Jesse's like, "No, like what part of the government, idiots?" And then they're like, the weird looking one, I think he called him.
That's great.
He said, "We're from heaven." He just straight out comes out and says it. Yeah. Now, I think in the same way that we know Cassidy was telling the truth, likely telling the truth about his age in the last episode, I feel like this guy is just kind of like I'm still wondering, are these guys from heaven? But something's up with them.
Yes.
Because they're clones. And they keep coming after him. Like there's it's something's going on. So you kind of I want to take him at face value. But we'll see kind of more about that. Cassidy promises them to kind of deliver Jesse to them. So I think that's what you're saying. And like Jesse's got something more on the horizon in terms of something that he may or may not need to
Cassidy,
do.
you mean?
Yeah.
Yeah.
Sorry.
Yes, I think Cassidy is a really interesting character because he doesn't really have to do anything. I think he's at the point where he doesn't really have any friends. He doesn't have any real connections, and I do think he has a really genuine bond with Jesse. Like he does see a real friend in him.
Yeah.
And somebody who will accept him, and frankly, maybe a preacher is the one sort of person he hasn't tried being friends with yet.
Mm-hmm.
But I think there is a real connection between those two, and I think Cassidy is kind of a guy who just kind of explores. Like, so what'll happen if I do this? What'll happen if I do that? Kind of thing. He's used to drifting. He's used to wandering, and I think it's I really like what they've done with him. Kind of set him up as like the church kind of gopher to just kind of do the odd jobs in order to be able to stay. And it's cool because he doesn't need to. He doesn't really need to do anything. But the fact that he's staying there is
he wants to be there.
Yeah, he does, even before he finds out about Jesse's power. And now there's something really keeping him there because I think he's never seen anything like it. I do think, as of right now, it does seem like his intentions are pretty pure in order to it seems like he wants to resolve things peacefully.
I think that keep going with your thoughts on it, and then I'll say what I think.
Well, the two gentlemen basically say they want to kill Jesse. Like they've made it clear they just want to kill him, and he's like, well, listen, how about I will bring him to you, and you can talk to him. He'll listen to me. I'll explain your situation, and that you have this thing that you guys want back, and we can just do it peacefully. And I think like three things. I don't know. I kind of do think Cassidy just wants to see what'll happen if he gets Jesse in the same space as these guys.
Yeah.
I do think he has Jesse's interest in mind, I guess is what I'm saying. So I think that we will probably see this show try to paint Cassidy as a potential turncoat a couple times. Like we may kind of, it seems that happens a lot to those kind of characters in just in fiction where they get painted as the would-be betrayer, and then either they are or usually like, whoops, no, he was friends all along. And Cassidy is such an interesting character in the books that they can kind of do whatever they want with him.
It seems to me as though Cassidy's kind of keeping them closer so that he can be more aware of what they're doing and where they're trying to be. Like it doesn't when I hear him say I'm going to like essentially deliver Jesse to you, I don't really believe, like I don't think he's just on the level going to be like, hey Jesse, these guys want to talk with you, and this is this. Like maybe that's how he'll explain it, but he'll just kind of be like, maybe he's doing this to allow himself to give Jesse the upper hand.
Yeah,
like
I think so.
That's what I came away with, but I do agree that it kind of paints him as potentially being somebody who could turn on,
especially
Jesse.
With the tease for the next episode.
Yeah.
It kind of does that, and I don't know what's going to happen. Truthfully, I think that he very well may just run to Jesse and go, "Hey, man, these guys." They say they're from heaven and they know about your power and they know what it is and they want it back. And then he'll say maybe like, this is our chance to figure out exactly what the hell it is. But I think he does almost have that little bit of Joker on him where he kind of just wants to see.
Chaotic force of curiosity. So, all right. And then we got two final points here. Eugene, or Arseface, is at dinner with his father, the sheriff, talking about Tracy Loach, the girl who's now opened her eyes, which apparently is being passed around town. So that's interesting to note. But Arseface mentions wanting to go and visit her, and his father says, stay away from the whole family. You want to get yourself killed? And then he calls them a monster swamp. So,
he calls the whole town a monster swamp, doesn't he? Because he's saying there's like maniacs on the loose and escaped lunatics. And
yeah. Which is, So I think that's kind of playing into the sheriff getting heckled last week, being called a murderer, and kind of like there's something going on here.
I have a theory about that now.
Is the theory founded in comic knowledge?
No.
So, well, I'll say the final scene was Ted Ryerson's funeral with a beautiful portrait.
Yeah, it's so awesome.
It's awesome.
I kind of want to buy it on that props website we were talking about.
Absolutely. And I think Emily, is the only one sitting there with the preacher giving the sermon. So,
and we see the John Custer tombstone in the foreground.
Oh yeah. And then there's like a gas outlet or something.
Yeah.
I don't really know if that meant anything or it was just kind of a.
Yeah, I don't know. That was interesting.
Like a weird. I don't know. I was like, my first thought was like, is that a Quincannon thing?
Yes, that's kind of what I thought too.
Yeah.
I kind of think there's some big giant something stewing with the Quincannon Empire, and it definitely seems like they're building towards this three-way conflict with Quincannon, Meat and Power, Jesse Custer, and Anvil. It seems like Quincannon's kind of trying to soak up as much real estate as they can, and for what purpose though, other than just growing?
Yeah.
Seems more nefarious than just building the commercial empire.
With that dark of an office that Odin's in, I don't know. I think things are pretty light and happy there. So, all right, what's your theory on the sheriff?
I think that Arseface is somehow involved in the accident that put the young Loach woman into the coma, and that they were calling him a murderer, Arseface. And so when his dad turned around to like kind of say, "What'd you say?" and because Arseface is the one who says, "Dad, just let it go."
Yeah.
Plus, he wants to go visit her, and his dad says, "Stay. You want to get yourself killed."
Yeah.
And I think maybe Arseface was either her boyfriend or something, and they got into a car wreck or somehow he was involved in her accident,
And that led to him wanting to kill himself.
Correct. And now he's this living, walking, terrible thing that I just love. Every time, I don't think an episode of this will go by where the very first scene of him in the episode I won't laugh a little bit because, and it's not because I think he's really funny. I'm in awe of this creation that they have because I hate that character so much in the comic, and he's really great in the show. Yeah, he's really great. Yeah, that's just great. But anyway, I think that they're somehow related, and I kind of missed the one-on-one talk between Eugene and the preacher in this one. I was really enjoying those, and I don't want them to just keep having them and never have it go anywhere, like this after-school special moment. But I do really love Arseface's he's so genuine, and he really, really wants to get good with God again. And he really was like devout when he was young. You say, I used to be able to talk to God, and I could hear him listening, and I could hear him talking to me. Now I can't anymore. And I think that's the most tragic thing in this whole show. Yeah, that's so much worse than a lot of the other terrible things we've seen so far because he just wants to. So he feels so bad about what he did, and he clearly wants to do whatever it takes to get good, to get better again. I almost said get good, and that's just he's so sad and just so great.
You talked about it a little bit in our Warcraft episode with like good people being the ones that really see the real unhappiness and bad things happening to them in terms of like Eugene seems to have this real heart, but it's kind of his own weakness kind of took it away from him, that moment of him being kind of like, I gotta end this, I messed something up, has kind of taken away the pure good that he felt that he was, and it leads him to ask the question of, does God hold grudges, that kind of thing.
Oh man, it's heartbreaking because he's so gross and so just kind of loathsome in the comic because he's really embarrassing and just kind of stupid, and you understand why his dad, I mean, I shouldn't say you understand why his dad hates him, but I do like in this show they humanize him so much more, and they humanize his dad because his dad and the sheriff, why am I blanking on his last name? Anyway, he in the comic is just awful. Like he's horrible to Arseface. He just ignores him, and he's always like, ugh, like face palming. But Arseface kind of is that way in the comic, where you kind of get it. He's just always embarrassed of his kid. Yeah. But in the show, he's just so human, and I like that they actually had a conversation. They had like a normal talk for a minute, and then he brings up Tracy Loach. Is that her name? I think so. Yeah. And then it kind of turns into that like,
this town's full of terrible things. Yeah,
and it gets a little dark. Yeah, Sheriff Root. Yep. And but yeah, I really like what they've done with those characters. I think it's really cool. They've become much more. Initially, when they said like W. Earl Brown was playing sheriff, he's playing Hugo Root, I was like, that's awesome. But he's so different from what I expected. But I'm really enjoying it.
That's good.
I think it's really good. But yeah, Eugene continues to just be just this little shining star. Yep. And it's great.
All right.
But I am really curious to see if that's going to play out like I think it is.
Yeah.
It's pretty sad.
That'll be interesting. So I think we can end up, we have a few questions from the episode. Who is Carlos is kind of the main one. Are the strange men actually from heaven, which is kind of we may or may not ever get any real confirmation about it, but we'll see. What's up with the Loach family? Like, I kind of took that, for some reason I took that speech a little more pointed towards the Loach family, but I think we can incorporate it into what your theory is of like what's going on with the Loach family and the Root family. Like, is your theory going to play out that similar way? Because I think there's like my question here: why is the sheriff so quick to tell Eugene to stay away? So that'll be interesting to see. And then kind of the other question that I had coming out of this was, will Cassidy actually deliver Jesse to the strange men? But in terms of answers from questions in the last episode, so we get the answer that Jesse's power does work on the girl in a coma. So clearly his power has effect on more than just conscious humans, which is important to note, I think. And then from episode 1, I had more questions about kind of Tulip's background and what messed up work she's into. We get a little bit more about that with her and Jesse, that flashback. So that'll seem like we'll get more on that later. So overall, episode 3,
I liked it a lot.
Yeah,
I think I probably liked it better than episode 2.
Yeah, I can agree with that.
I think it's a little more character driven, probably, but I think it's everything moving in the right direction. Mm-hmm. And this one felt like it had more forward momentum than even probably the first episode.
Yeah.
So I don't know. I do really want to go back and watch that pilot again now. I think,
that'd be interesting.
The shorter length of the episodes, I'm not sure if I'm really digging it. I kind of am, because I feel like it's gonna, with the limited amount of episodes we have and the shorter runtime, I think that things are going to start to really pick up steam, and that's definitely good. I'd rather have a little bit less than a little bit too much. Yeah,
it's really weird. We've both kind of remarked on how that 90-minute premiere was really kind of, it's made these past 2 episodes seem like they fly by. So
definitely.
That's interesting. But yeah, no, I liked it a lot too, and I'm excited to see more. So, all right. Once again, you can find more episodes of our podcast on g2tpodcast.com. That's the letter G, number 2, letter T podcast.com. Or also on iTunes, Stitcher Radio, and Google Play Music. So check that out as well. We're also G2T Podcast on Twitter. And you can email us at g2tpodcast@gmail.com to tell us what you think of our show and share your thoughts on AMC's Preacher so we can read them on air, much like Bruce. Thank you, Bruce. Send us corrections, observations, and anything regarding Preacher or our podcast. If you want to hear Nick and I talk about film with a few other friends, be sure to check out the Midwest Film Nerds podcast at midwestfilmnerds.com. And then the Midwest Podcast Network also has a video game podcast called the Midwest Game Nerds Podcast. Make sure you check that out at midwestgamenerds.com. Our theme music is the song All In by the band The Red Thread, and it's being used under a non-commercial Creative Commons license. And I think we can end here. Make sure you check out the Preacher Insider podcast on iTunes, and they do have 2 episodes up now. So go and check out their podcast for this week. And I think I found a sign off for the episode.
Oh.
And I think I just want to say, go forth and speak the good word.
There you go.